21 minutes. That was how long the provincial governor of al-Mazra remained alive after his convoy left the Eastern Administration compound on the morning of September 14, 2011. 21 minutes from the first motorcycle appearing in his rear mirror to the detonation that tore open the lead SUV at the Al-Qadar overpass. By the time the smoke drifted across the road barriers, the governor was dead. His security detail was shattered, and the coalition command in the state of Hadran was facing a fact it had spent months trying not to admit. The insurgency was no longer improvising, it was learning. The city of al-Mazra sat in the south-central belt of Hadran, a state that had become the main logistical corridor between the coast and the dry interior after the collapse of the central government in 2010. It was a place of rail spurs, grain depots, fuel yards, and old industrial neighborhoods packed around a river that divided the city into worlds that no map could explain. On paper, al-Mazra belonged to the transitional authorities and the coalition mission that supported them. In reality, whole districts answered to family alliances, black market transport bosses, former army officers, and clerics with private militias. By the summer of 2011, the American-led intelligence mission in Hadran had built exactly the kind of system Washington trusted. It had layered technical surveillance over road networks, intercept platforms over urban centers, and contractor-heavy analytical cells over almost every major district. It had databases, aerial coverage, pattern-of-life analysis, and enough armored mobility to impress any visiting delegation. Yet it kept missing the people who mattered. It could see convoys, towers, neighborhoods, and radio traffic. It could not see intention soon enough to stop it. Into this deteriorating campaign stepped a smaller Allied presence from the Republic of Norland, a northern European state with no dramatic footprint, little political appetite for publicity, and a security service that almost nobody in the coalition headquarters took seriously. Norland's external intelligence branch, supported by a compact reconnaissance element from its military special operations group, had been invited into Hadran because of its prior work in clan-based conflict zones along the Inner Sea. The reaction from many larger partners was dismissive. The Norlanders were considered competent, quiet, and far too small to matter. The governor's assassination changed that instantly. Within 48 hours, the Norland team in al-Mazra produced the first credible assessment of how the attack had actually been executed. It was not the work of a loose roadside bomb cell. It was the product of an organized urban assassination network that had already penetrated the city's traffic police, transport licensing office, and 2 fuel depots used by the provincial administration. More dangerously, the Norlanders concluded that the attack had been a rehearsal. The real target was not the governor, it was the state itself. This chapter establishes the central question. How did a small foreign service, operating with fewer officers, less money, and almost no institutional prestige inside the coalition, identify a hidden power structure in al-Mazra faster than the much larger systems around it? And why did their answer expose not just a militant network, but a fatal weakness in the way the war was being understood? Hadran in 2011 was the kind of state that misled outsiders. From altitude, it looked governable. Its highways still functioned, its river ports still loaded grain barges, its provincial councils still met in guarded compounds behind blast walls and flags. But the appearance of administration concealed a deeper fragmentation. The National Army had splintered the year before. Interior Ministry units remained on payroll, but often took instructions from local patrons. Former intelligence officers sold access, records, and names. Smuggling networks moved medicine by day and detonators by night. The bureaucracy survived only because everyone needed it just enough to keep looting it. Al-Mazra was the hinge of this system.
Whoever understood the city could move fuel, weapons, money, and people from the coast to the interior without triggering national attention. That made the city uniquely difficult to read. The official structure and the real structure occupied the same offices, checkpoints, and contracts. A police colonel might be loyal to the state in daylight, a tribal patron after sunset, and a militia financier by the end of the week. The American mission interpreted this landscape through volume. More sensors, more reports, more names, more technical collection. By late 2011, their Hadron task force had processed tens of thousands of calls, vehicle movements, and association charts. Analysts could often identify where violence had come from. They rarely knew why a specific person had chosen a specific street on a specific day. That gap was decisive. The enemy had learned to live inside the delay between observation and understanding. Norland approached Hadron differently because it had fewer illusions available to it. Its services had spent decades dealing with small, adaptive threats in unstable border environments, where technical superiority could support operations but never define them. Their officers were trained to build intelligence from social mechanics rather than abstract network diagrams. They looked for family obligations, business resentments, religious prestige, protection rackets, and inherited feuds. In al-Mazra, those were not secondary details. They were the operating system. The pressure inside coalition headquarters rose after the governor's assassination because the attack shattered the narrative of slow stabilization. The killing had occurred in broad daylight on a route that had been considered secure. Worse, the attackers displayed coordinated traffic shaping, local route denial, clean withdrawal, and advanced knowledge of convoy procedures. That meant foreknowledge from inside official structures. The larger services recognized infiltration in theory. The Norlanders began naming the doors through which it had entered. This chapter moves the story from atmosphere into conflict. The battlefield is not a front line. It is a city hidden within its own institutions. The coalition is not blind, but its vision is distorted by altitude, process, and scale. The stage is now set for a different kind of intelligence campaign, one that starts not with machines, but with the smallest human irregularities.
To understand why the Norlanders gained ground in al-Mazra, the story has to return to the architecture of their system. Norland's intelligence directorate had never been large, but it had evolved under conditions that punished bureaucratic delay. During the shipping crises and proxy conflicts of the 1990s, it developed a field doctrine built on decentralized authority, compact source handling, and aggressive urban observation. Its officers were expected to make recruitment decisions in real time, evaluate deception without waiting for committee approval, and survive in places where formal protection either arrived late or not at all. The military element attached to them came from Reconnaissance Group 7, a unit shaped less by direct action mythology than by the slow disciplines of surveillance, rural insertion, and covert urban support. Their selection emphasized solitary navigation, memory, language acquisition, and the ability to remain physically and psychologically functional in environments where there would be no visible rescue architecture. The operators deployed to Hadron were not specialists in spectacular raids. They were specialists in staying close to dangerous people without being noticed. This mattered in al-Mazra because the city rewarded human fluency over technical dominance. Within 3 weeks of the governor's assassination, the Norland team had identified the assassination network's first outer layer, not through intercepted command traffic, but through traffic wardens, diesel allocations, and municipal overtime sheets. One licensing clerk had approved unusual motorcycle renewals in batches linked to courier families. A fuel office supervisor had redirected reserve diesel to 2 garages that did not officially exist. A traffic lieutenant's cousin had quietly paid off a debt after years of insolvency. None of these anomalies mattered in isolation. Together, they described a hidden logistics chain. The Norlanders also moved in a way that unnerved their coalition partners. They met prospective sources in barbershops, grain markets, and cramped apartment stairwells. They used cover professions tied to procurement, inspection, and transport arbitration. They built a source network among widowed administrators, customs assistants, minor clerics, and mechanics who serviced official vehicles after midnight. Their reports began to contain the kind of texture that larger systems had been starving for. Who resented whom? Which police captain feared exposure? Which militia accountant drank where? Which warehouse foreman had started carrying a second phone only on Thursdays? Most importantly, their system trusted the officer on the ground. If a Norland case officer judged that a source could be developed within hours, the meeting happened within hours. If a surveillance team saw a fleeting pattern that mattered, they were empowered to shift assets immediately. There was oversight, but not paralysis. In al-Mazra, where useful intelligence decayed fast, this difference was everything. By the end of this chapter, the audience understands the deeper theme of the story. The contest is not simply between two intelligence services, it is between two institutional philosophies. One believes that risk must be reduced through structure. The other believes that in certain wars, too much structure creates a different and more lethal form of risk: irrelevance. The breakthrough came in November 2011 during what later became known inside Norland's files as the Cedar Ledger phase. A mid-level accountant inside the Provincial Road Authority, recruited after months of quiet cultivation, revealed that contract payments for resurfacing projects were being split through 3 shell firms linked to the office of Deputy Security Director Fadil Prarim. On paper, the money funded road repair, traffic barriers, and emergency lane control. In reality, it financed route surveillance, disposable motorcycles, false checkpoints, and payments to municipal workers who manipulated congestion before attacks. This was the hidden mechanism behind the governor's assassination. The bomb team had not merely placed an explosive on a road, it had shaped the road itself. It had used licensed workers, compliant patrol units, and civic routine as part of the kill chain. The city had been weaponized through administration. Once this became clear, the Norlanders stopped hunting bomb makers first and began hunting facilitators. They mapped the office clerks who altered shift rosters, the depot managers who released fuel after hours, the procurement intermediaries who laundered militia money through public maintenance contracts, and the police officers who made checkpoints selectively porous. The result was devastating because the network depended on people who did not think of themselves as insurgents. They thought of themselves as practical men with invoices, relatives, and opportunities. The coalition was slow to grasp the significance. Some analysts still wanted the smoking gun of a single insurgent commander directing the whole structure. The Norlanders argued that al-Mazra's most dangerous network did not look like a military hierarchy. It looked like a municipal ecosystem. That interpretation proved correct when a joint surveillance effort tracked one of the shell firms to a riverfront warehouse district used to store both asphalt binder and military-grade detonating cord. At this point, the campaign turns from discovery to acceleration. Raids begin, but they are tightly bounded and intelligence-driven. Small arrests, document exploitation, covert observation posts overlooking loading bays and service alleys. Every operation feeds the next one. The network, sensing pressure, starts shedding phones, changing drivers, and rotating sleeping locations. But by now, the Norlanders are not reading only devices, they are reading habit, pressure, fear, and institutional movement.
The chapter ends with a reveal that raises the stakes beyond provincial corruption. Financial traces and travel records link Karim's office to handlers in a neighboring state, indicating that the al-Mazra network is not simply criminal or local. It is part of a deliberate, foreign-backed effort to hollow out Hadran's transitional government from inside, while preserving enough visible order to keep external aid flowing. The enemy is no longer a city conspiracy, it is a strategy. The decisive campaign lasted 84 days from early December 2011 into late February 2012. It did not begin with a dramatic battle. It began with removals. One assistant fuel manager disappeared on his way to dawn prayer. 2 records clerks were detained after carrying backup ledgers to a family apartment on the West Bank. A municipal radio technician was taken from a bus depot with a memory card stitched into his jacket hem. None of these names mattered publicly. Operationally, they were load-bearing beams. What followed was the intelligence snowball every field service dreams of and almost never achieves at scale. Each detention produced names, account links, or schedule patterns. Each schedule pattern exposed another transfer point. Each transfer point revealed another official compromise. The Norlanders worked with a small coalition analytical cell willing to move at their pace, processing document caches within hours rather than days. Their military reconnaissance teams provided street-level confirmation where larger systems still wanted additional remote validation. The tempo itself became a weapon. The network attempted to adapt. It shifted funds from roads to sanitation contracts. It began using handwritten relays instead of phones. It hid munitions in grain inspection lots. It moved key planners into nominally secure state compounds. But every adaptation generated friction, and friction is visible to people close enough to feel it. A sanitation route ran too often through one district. A deputy registrar started sleeping in his office. 2 brothers who had not spoken in years suddenly resumed contact. A police logistics colonel requested replacement barriers that no checkpoint had reported losing. These were the signals the Norlanders understood better than anyone else in theater. The climax of the campaign came in February 2012 when the team uncovered a plan far larger than the governor's assassination. The network intended to trigger a coordinated collapse of al-Mazra's governing credibility by attacking the river power substation, assassinating 2 judges, and staging simultaneous police defections in 3 districts. The objective was not mass casualties alone. It was administrative implosion. If successful, the state would appear to fail in one synchronized moment, and foreign sponsors would gain a proxy-controlled corridor without ever raising a flag. The final operation targeted a records complex attached to the old Inland Revenue Office, a place so bureaucratically dull that coalition forces had ignored it for months. Beneath tax archives and cadastral files, the Norlanders identified the command node of the network's coordination cell. The assault package was compact, timed, and built around capture rather than destruction. The entry was clean. The resistance was brief but disciplined, confirming that trained external advisors had been involved. Inside, they found ledgers, coded maintenance schedules, payroll overlays, and the signatures that tied officials, police officers, and foreign handlers into one functioning mechanism. The planned collapse of al-Mazra was stopped less than 72 hours before execution. The immediate results were undeniable. Over the next month, attacks on provincial officials dropped sharply. Smuggling throughput on the eastern river routes declined. 3 compromised police districts were quietly restructured. Foreign funding channels were disrupted through banking seizures and deniable arrests outside Hadron. Coalition officials privately acknowledged that the Norlanders had identified and dismantled the most sophisticated urban penetration network uncovered in the state since the war began. But the ending was not clean, because the truth was not convenient. The captured records showed that several figures in the transitional administration, publicly presented as reform partners, had tolerated parts of the network so long as it remained useful against rival factions. Exposing everything would have destroyed the provincial government, embarrassed the coalition mission, and handed propaganda to every armed actor in Hadron. So the full story was buried under the language of administrative realignment, anti-corruption enforcement, and enhanced provincial resilience. Deputy Security Director Fadil Karim did not stand trial in a televised courtroom. He died 6 months later in what official reporting described as an armed encounter near the border. 2 judges survived because the team sent to kill them never moved. The power station remained online. Grain still moved downriver. Al-Mazra did not become stable, not truly, but it did not collapse, and in that phase of that war, preventing collapse was victory enough. The final meaning of the story lies in what it reveals about intelligence itself. The larger coalition mission had more aircraft, more intercepts, more armored movement, and more institutional confidence. The Norlanders had fewer illusions. They understood that states often die not from frontal assault, but from administrative corrosion, from the quiet capture of schedules, fuel, paper, signatures, and routine. They looked at al-Mazra and saw that the war was being fought not only in safe houses and alleyways, but in licensing offices, road contracts, payroll systems, and family obligations. That was why they succeeded. They did not merely find the enemy's weapons, they found the enemy's process. They did not simply map who carried out attacks, they mapped who made those attacks possible. And once that map was complete, the network could no longer survive inside the city it had learned to manipulate. Years later, in internal coalition studies that never became public, the al-Mazra case was cited as one of the clearest examples of a small allied service outperforming a much larger intelligence architecture by understanding the social mechanics of a war better than the machines built to observe it. No parade marked that achievement. No monument was raised to the officers who spent winter nights in rented rooms over machine shops, or the surveillance teams who memorized shift changes at river depots, or the analyst who noticed that road resurfacing budgets and assassination routes were telling the same story in 2 different languages. The city remembered something simpler. It remembered that in early 2012, when many believed Hadran's south-central corridor was about to fall apart completely, al-Mazra held. The courts opened, the lights stayed on, the roads remained passable. The government, weak and compromised and deeply imperfect, survived long enough to avoid being replaced by a network built in darkness. And that is how the story ends, not with triumph, with prevention.